Hello, California Pacific family. This is Bishop Dottie Escobedo Frank coming to talk to you today about things that are happening around us. In August of 2023, I was flying out of Hawaii when the fire happened at Lahaina. And soon after that, I was contacted by two bishops, the one from Louisiana and the one from the Florida conference. And both of them said, we know what it's like to be in disasters, and we want to send you $10,000 to start so that your conference can attend to the disasters right now. And that we will also put money in later to UMCOR. The money started coming from all around our connection to help us rebuild and care for the people of Lahaina. So today I come to you recognizing that there are storms that have happened and that Hurricane Helene has done damage, as you've seen, across a swath of our country. And because of that damage, and because we are United Methodists, we want to gather together and be part of the solution and use our connection to help out. There have been 6 of our annual conferences who have been affected. You can see them on the screen. And they are in need right now to provide immediate help with water and with food, etc. We're asking you to take time to give right now to take care of our family on the other side of the United States and to help show our love to them. On our website, there's a link that you can go to. You can see it on the screen where you can give. And we will be sending that money to these conferences so that they can immediately disperse the money. We also will give you the link to UMCOR, which will be coming in as soon as possible to help those people on the ground to reestablish their lives. UMCOR is also looking for people who will come and be part of work teams right now. And so if you're interested in being part of a work team to go assist at this moment, you can connect with Carl Quartz or Reverend Dr. Denise Barnes. Our neighbors have gone through a storm, a devastating storm, and their livelihood is gone, their shelter is gone, they have some food and probably not enough water. So this is an immediate need, and I'm asking you to dig into your wallets and see if there's a way that you can give by giving to us online. When you give through the website here, what will happen is that we will disperse that money in those conferences in the areas of most need. And when you give to UMCOR, it'll go directly to them. So I pray and I hope that you can find a way to give. This is a scripture that is deep in our history and our memory, but becomes very real at a time like this. When Jesus said, I was hungry and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. Today, our beloved people need your help. So thank you for all the ways you are generous in this moment. God be with you. I'm praying for you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you on this Zoom website. I wanted to first start us out with a little devotions. I've been thinking about what's happening around the world, and the story that came to me was a story that is way back in our scriptures. It comes from Genesis chapter 4, the story of Cain and Abel. Remember, after Cain took out his brother's life, God came to Cain and said, Cain, where's your brother? And Cain replied to God, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the scripture story after that goes on to describe many things in their lives. But the simple answer to the question, am I my brother's keeper, is yes. Yes, you are. And if you look at all the scriptures from that point on to the end of times in Revelation, it continues to show us how we are our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper, our siblings' keeper. That the answer to that question is yes. When we love God and we love each other, then we are certainly called to be our brothers and sisters and siblings' keeper. So right now, the world is going through devastation through the hurricane and the floods that are happening in the east of our US, through the fires and the mudslides that happen in the west, through the wars in Palestine and Congo and Ukraine, and also the internal political strife that is going on in our country. All that is happening. And yet the question that is before us is, are we our siblings' keeper? And the answer is yes. We are called to be there, to be present, to do what we can, to be a part of God's grace and God's mercy on the ground, right where we live. So I want to encourage you, wherever you are today, to remember as you go throughout the rest of your day and you go throughout your Sunday worship tomorrow, that yes, we are called to be keepers of each other. Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for the ways that you remind us in the stories that seem so raw and emotional and difficult to hear, that we are called to be there for each other. So as we go throughout this session, help us to remember why we do what we do, and help us to always see those that you see. In Jesus we pray. Amen. Well, welcome to this special called session of the California Pacific Annual Conference. We gathered together today for holy conferencing, and we conference before God, before each other, so that we can make our decisions together as one body. We are now called to order. I would like to begin by calling Reverend Bob Rhodes to begin to help us along the way with our opening motions and test vote.
Good afternoon, friends. For most of us, it's the afternoon. Before I begin with our opening motions, I hope that you have seen the test question, the welcome question that is there with our vPoll, our voting software. That question really began with "Peace be with you," and you could choose "and also with you" or "and also with your spirit." That's been up for the last half hour or so, and so that was, again, just set up as a welcome question, so you all knew that your software was working. I'm going to go ahead and show you the results of that, and then I'm going to give you a test question that has to do with the vibrant issue of dessert. So here first we'll go with the results of our welcome question. So you'll see that overwhelmingly we went one way versus the other. Now I'm going to broadcast a test question about whether or not you prefer to eat dessert first. And so I will watch as those responses come in, and I will see when that slows down a bit, and then I'll broadcast the response. So again, the question is, do you affirm the eating of dessert first? You can mark yes if you do like eating dessert first, no if you do not. I don't have any kind of timer running, so you should have plenty of time to vote. I'll give it a few more seconds here. If you're having any trouble accessing the voting platform, please make sure you comment not in the chat, but in the Q&A. There are folks moderating the Q&A who can respond to any issues you might be having. So I'm going to stop this and broadcast the results. All right. That's a fun question. All right, friends, I'm going to move us now to our opening motions. There are 5 of these opening motions. These are some standard things that we need to do most of the times that we meet, whether we're in person or online. So, Bishop, I move to set the bar of this special session of the California Pacific Conference to be 1, members of the conference as specified by the discipline and the rules of the conference. as well as lay members of the Board of Ordained Ministry, the Bishop's Secretary, and such other persons as specified by the Bishop and approved by the conference, authenticated and connected through the Zoom webinar and or vPoll platforms, and or present in our broadcast location. 2, the staff and technical crew. And as a part of this, the registrar and others designated by the registrar shall ensure that participants are among those named in 1 and 2 previously. So Bishop, that's the opening motion number 1.
All right, motion number 1 is before you. Are you ready to vote? All right, let's vote now. Is it on?
Friends, I'll give you a few more seconds and then we'll see the results. All right, here we go. Stopping the vote and broadcasting the results to opening motion number 1. Checking on the results here.
All right, the votes are in. You have affirmed the bar.
All right, friends, I move that the agenda in the special preliminary report be the official agenda of this special session of the California Pacific Conference, and that the agenda chair and or conference secretary be authorized to make necessary adjustments in consultation with the bishop. So Bishop, I move opening motion number 2.
All right, opening motion number 2 is before you. You may vote.
Friends, I'll give this just a few more seconds. All right, I'll stop and show the results.
All right, you have affirmed motion number 2.
Friends, I move to opening motion number 3. I move that the proceedings published in the UM Daily be the official minutes of this special session of the California Pacific Conference after they are corrected and approved. So Bishop, I move motion number 3.
All right, motion number 3 is before you. Go ahead and vote now.
A few more seconds and then we'll publish the results. All right, I'll stop the vote and show the results.
All right, you have affirmed motion number 3. Well,
Opening motion number 4, I move that the registration forms and the registrar's list of those who have signed in to the online platforms shall be used as the official roll call of this special session of the California Pacific Conference. Bishop, I move opening motion number 4.
Opening motion number 4 is before you. Go ahead and vote.
Friends, I'll give it just a few more seconds and then we'll broadcast the results. Again, if you're having any trouble with the voting platform, please let the folks in the Q&A know. I'll broadcast these results.
And you have affirmed the official roll call.
The final opening motion, I move that all legislative items not adopted by the end of this special session of the California Pacific Conference be referred to the appropriate entities. Bishop, I move opening motion number 5.
Opening motion number 5 is before you. Go ahead and vote now.
Giving you just a few more seconds to vote. Again, if you're having any trouble with the voting software, please let the folks in the Q&A know. Broadcasting the results.
It looks like you have affirmed the referral of items that are not adopted.
Thank you, Bishop. That concludes the opening motions.
All right, thank you, Bob, for leading us in that. We're going to move on to the orders of the day. Reverend Kathy Kapp.
Greetings, Bishop Dottie Escobedo Frank, Cabinet, and members of the California Pacific Annual Conference. I welcome you to our special called session where we will deal with 5 more items. 1 is a rules change and 4 are matters relating to our budget for 2025. And I just want to point out that our rules change is available on page 27 of the special preliminary report. And recommendation 2410 can be found on page 23. All of the other items, in fact, all of the items can be found on the website, the California Pacific or calpacamumc.org. Thank you for putting that up there. And all of that information is available on the website. And I would ask our media team to please put up our orders for the day, which are entirely to deal with the rules change and the conference budget for 2025. Bishop, I move the orders for the day.
Thank you, Kathy. The orders of the day are before you. You can see them on the screen. We're going to vote on those, so take out your device and vote now. You have affirmed the orders of the day. Thank you, Reverend Kathy. Our next item on the agenda is the rules changes. I'm turning to Reverend Bob Rhodes.
Thank you, Bishop. Rules item 24-04 addresses legislative sections. It has been published on the special preliminary report, page 27, and has been also individually been made available on the special called session webpage on the conference website. Bishop, I move rules 24-04.
All right, rules 24-04 are before you. You can take out your devices and vote now. So the question hasn't come to you yet to vote, so I want to ask if there's any discussion before we move to the vote now. Is there anyone who wants to have a question or discussion on this one? All right, does not look like we have any discussion on this matter, so go ahead and take out your devices and vote now. All right, you have affirmed Rule 24-04. We move on to recommendation 24-11 on staff salaries. Reverend Jonathan Chute.
Good afternoon. Recommendation number 2411 is found on page 19 of the special preliminary report, and it concerns recommendations of staff salary ranges that are factored into the budget that is being presented by CFA. But these were voted on, recommended by the Staff Relations Committee, and are before us for consideration. So I move the recommendation 2411 as it is available in your preliminary report.
So the recommendation 2411 is before you. Are there any questions or speeches for or against? If so, put it in the Q&A. Reverend Blair Stowe has a question. You may go now.
Greetings, Bishop. Reverend Blair Trigstead Stowe, clergy, First Ontario is my charge. And I have a question about, for the committee, clarification on particularly the camping staff that's listed here, camp program manager, camp operations manager. These positions are listed under exempt, but it's my understanding that we have very few employees that are full-time exempt in those roles any longer. So what my question is are these full-time minimums and maximums being translated into hourly wages for the part-time employees that are holding those positions? Or would those positions be better moved into the non-exempt status that more accurately represents the staff we actually have?
All right, that question is for Jonathan. Can you answer that one?
I probably don't actually have information to answer that question, but if when people are either exempt or non-exempt, And if they are working less than a full-time position, then it would be my assumption that they are being treated as non-exempt, that is hourly employees. There's no particular benefit. In fact, there's a detriment to paying people who are part-time full-time wages. So that's my assumption, but I don't have any knowledge of those particular persons or their positions.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to ask if Jan Hansen is in the room. If so, she could answer if she has any further information for us.
I'm here now. Bishop, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Jan.
I apologize. I feel like such a, well, it's Bishop, I do have information that might help in that with that question. And that is that the positions that are listed as exempt, those manager and director positions, those are exempt by salary and by duties. The exempt salaries are not prorated for the number of hours worked. The people who are classified as exempt in those positions are, the duties they perform are exempt in nature, meaning they're more than 50% of their time is spent on exempt work, and we are not allowed by labor laws to prorate exempt salaries. If we have truly designated them as exempt, then they need to receive the exempt level salary, and that is a straight salary with no consideration given to hours worked, because if we considered hours worked, then we would be in effect saying that they were not exempt.
Thank you, Jan. Looks like we have another question.
Bishop, a question from James Kim Cardia.
James Kim Cardia, are you there? Peace be with you.
Hello, I am here.
What is your question, James?
Yes, I wanted to know if
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Oh, I am James Kim from Cardia United Methodist Church, lay leader and lay person representing for the annual conference. My understanding is that an exempt salary has to be minimally double whatever the minimum wage is in relation to I guess Los Angeles has a little higher rate, and I was wondering if that's reflected in this chart.
Thank you, James. We're gonna turn that over to Jan again.
Thank you, Bishop, and thank you, James, for the question. We have actually run that question by our employment attorneys for consideration and advice, and they have advised that it's the state minimum that applies. So all the different ordinances throughout California that might have a different minimum wage, but that's not something that we would take into account for this. So it is the state minimum that's used.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jan. We have one more question coming in from Reverend Rob Fiesler. Peace be with you, Rob.
I put it in the chat. I think the question that I'm still wondering about is, are those, I'm sorry.
Would you please introduce yourself?
Reverend Rob Fiesler, clergy, Santa Barbara First. I think the question Blair raised earlier I'm wondering if those positions are actually filled by people, those exempt positions, or are those open positions that are not actually filled at this point?
Jan, would you like to answer that again?
Thank you. I'll try that. Hello, Rob.
Hi.
The question about whether they're filled or not, the food service manager is filled, and the program manager is filled on a kind of a part-time basis, becoming a program coordinator in the off season. And I don't know that we currently have an operations manager at the camps, but those are approved ranges in the event that those positions are activated during the year. So we want to make sure that if that is the case, then we'll have a salary range ready for them.
Thanks, Jan.
You're welcome.
Any others? All right, looks like that's all the questions we have for now. Let us move on towards the vote that was proposed by Reverend Jonathan Shute. Recommendation 2411. Please pull out your devices and you may vote now. All right, recommendation 2411 has been passed. We are moving on now to recommendation 2412 regarding retiree health care. And Rob Sprott, would you please present this for us? Peace be with you, Rob.
Bishop, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Bishop. This is Rod Sprott. I was trying to get unmuted and I was frustrated about that, and then someone did it for me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm chair of the or the new chair of the Board of Pensions and Health Benefits, and I moved the recommendation as presented on page 11 of the preliminary reports.
All right.
Recommendation 2412.
Okay. The recommendation has been moved. Are there any questions or speeches for or against? Please let us know in the Q&A. All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the vote. So pull out your devices and vote now. All right, the results are in. You have affirmed recommendation 2412. Thank you, Rod. And now we're moving on to the budget, and we're going to be calling on Reverend Molly Vetter.
Greetings, Bishop, lay leaders, and our good people of the annual conference. I don't know if it's possible to start my video or how I do that. I'd love to look at y'all if that's helpful. Oh, here we go. I am Molly Vetter. My pronouns are she, her. For the purposes of tracking the inclusion of our gathering, I'll tell you that I'm a white adult woman and a clergy member of the conference. And I am the new chair of our Council on Finance and Administration, which I'll call CFA. I want to start with gratitude to Howard Hudson, who's capably led the CFA for the past very many years. And also, I want to share deep gratitude to Christy Jenner, who stepped in as our interim treasurer shortly before annual conference. Her capable leadership has really been a help in preparing us, not only for the budget that we have to present today, but for the work that we're doing in coming days as we seek to prepare a budget for 2026 on the other side of this conference. I took up this role in July, and I'm grateful for your trust in me, grateful for the collaboration of our conference staff and committee leaders. Their collaborative spirits made it possible for us to do this work together, with CFA giving guidance about the size and scope of our budget for next year, and leaders of ministry areas and administrative responsibility areas help in figuring out how to live out our mission and priorities within those parameters. I want to take you through a little bit of the presentation. I hope that this won't feel tedious, but I'd love to give clear and helpful information in a spirit of transparency and sustainability. We've heard questions from some of you and have tried to address those in a few comments here. So I want to start with saying that in addition to the budget that we're going to bring for your approval today and the quotas as well, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been working on as we do some work that gets us through this budget that we're presenting and also sets us up to be able to continue this work that our bishop has named as a priority for us of doing this sort of deeper thinking and realignment of how we do things, what we're doing, and how we're using our resources for the sake of our ministry and mission with an eye toward long-term sustainability and transparency. We have been looking at what apportionment capacity there exists in our system, and especially the local churches. We've been looking at payment patterns over the last 10 years, comparing the apportionments contributed to those budgeted. Over this 10-year period, our average overall is 79%, but it fluctuated significantly on different years. Certainly, the years that the COVID pandemic changed a lot of our lives and giving patterns, and when CFA granted the ability for less than full 100% apportionment payment to count as full, we had fluctuations. We had fluctuations in giving after the General Conference in 2019 and saw signs of its effect on our sort of investment in shared ministry in this place. We're trying to understand more about how to read that and how to plan for going forward. And so we really see this 2025 budget as a bridge that helps us do some deeper work toward the 2026 budget. As promised at annual conference, as we promised you, we had a set of focus groups, 7 of them that met in August, and a survey that went out to the whole conference. Almost 200 people responded to it. And at a ministry summit in September, leaders gathered and brainstormed together. We've heard lots of common threads that are helping inform our work. And we look forward to how that will bear more consequence on what we're doing into the future. We know that the realities in local churches are challenging. that the need to have programs and services that serve our churches is more critical now than it has been in the past. And we want to work together to make sure we're meeting those needs. So we've started taking a deep dive into assessing and having a strategic plan for how to use reserves that the conference has so that we can fund vital ministries now and for years to come. CFA's been doing, has committed to doing a study about the way that we calculate apportionments. We are exploring which formula to use. Our current decimal model that in which the conference decides on a budget together, and then we figure out how to fairly divide it amongst the churches of the congregation, is the model that we've been following. We're contemplating a model that other conferences have moved to that's a percentage model. We choose certain categories in our local church budgets, either contributions or expenses, to tie a percentage of that amount as what we would contribute to the larger church. So instead of starting with a total dollar amount that's then divided up amongst the churches, we would start with a percentage rate related to local church budgets that then would become the total amount available at the annual conference. This is a switch in thinking about how we do things. So we're exploring what the consequences and opportunities of that would be to see which model serves our churches and the annual conference best. We know that that includes asking which of the key statistical data we're using in the calculation so that we can reflect the realities in local churches and our shared values. Those are the big ideas we're stirring up, but the task before us today is to present a budget with like actual numbers on a spreadsheet for 2025. I hope that you've had a chance to review the budget that you'll find both in the preliminary report or through the link as recommendation 2410. Many of you logged on to a learning lab that we had at the end of last month or watched the recording. And that gave you even more background on these things that I've been talking about, as well as the budget. The helpful narrative in the preliminary report starts on page 9 of the preliminary report. That is useful background information, but the budget that we'll actually be voting on starts on page 23 or through the link that takes you directly to recommendation 2410. The budget that we're proposing for 2025 is basically flat from the budget that we're using for 2024. Given the sort of short runway that we've had to put this together, we didn't want to make any major changes while we're asking these really big questions. So we want to continue steadily and be asking bigger questions that may have a bigger impact next year. We're looking toward a long-term and sustainable strategy, and we really see this as a stepping stone or a bridge during a season of exploration and reimagining. And we know that well, Christy Drinner says that work starts tomorrow, but I have to preach. So maybe like Monday, we'll start at that work. There are a few key items that I want to point out to you. The first is that having been grateful for the work of Church and Society, I have learned to read budgets as moral documents. We should, by looking at the budget, be able to see the values and priorities of the annual conference. And I hope that's the case this year. In a time of overall contraction, I want to flag that there are some values that we hold, but that you won't see in the apportioned budget. In a number of cases, there are other sources of funding, such as income from designated reserves or specific uses that we have available and are using. So, for example, we plan in 2025 to use reserve funds to provide ongoing support for ministry development plans in all of our ethnic committees. This is especially true for Hispanic Ministries Committee, which is at work developing sustainable plans for the future and may include a staff person. Also, our Next Generation Ministries Task Force is being assembled now to do a more thorough assessment of our conference ministries with young people and to bring a plan to the next session of annual conference, along with a plan for sustainable funding to accompany it. Until that, we plan to use reserve funds, special offering funds, and quota funds to financially support the task force and the work of our youth and young adult councils. Another thing that we value, but you won't see in the budget, is support of our retirees' health care. Expenses related to that have significant funding from other sources. So it's something that we invest our funds in, but not through apportioned funds. And similarly, funds for new church starts. We have $300,000 in our apportioned budget to fund new church starts, but an additional $200,000 we anticipate coming from designated reserves. Since Annual Conference 2013, we've had the habit or the practice of including a budgeted gap to account for our expectation that not all churches will be able to pay 100% of their asking. This gap has always been an approximation, not a precise reflection of what the collection rate has actually been. The budget that we're presenting still includes a gap, but it's a smaller percentage than before. We know that this means that we'll need to watch spending to make sure that our expenses are lining up with actual receipts. And I would note that we are reworking our financial accounting software and expect it to be online for the beginning of 2025. That will make regular reports easier to generate and more accessible to make it possible to do that work. I would flag that there's an increase in the Episcopal area funding, and that's because the position of assistant to bishop is moving from being funded outside of the apportioned budget all into the apportioned budget. And I would also flag that a majority of increases in departments are related to staffing costs, reflecting the salary ranges that we just approved and our anticipation that there will be rising healthcare expenses. That's what I have to say about the budget. There's two recommendations we're going to bring, but the first is the budget. So I set it before you now, and I would move adoption of recommendation 2410.
Thank you, Molly, for your good work. Recommendation 2410 is before you. This is the time now where we take questions or comments for or against. And it sounds like we have a question from Reverend Selena Kidd. And this question, Reverend Selena Kidd, could you please state your question and first introduce yourself?
Hello, Bishop Dottie. Yes, my name is Reverend Selena Kidd. I'm appointed to North Coast United Methodist Church. I'm just wondering if there's a year-to-date 2024 budget that we can see.
All right. Let's take that question to Christy. Christy Benner.
Thank you. Great question. There's not one that I can easily present for the annual conference at this time.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments, statements for or against? Okay. We have a question from Reverend Rob Fiesler. Can you introduce yourself, Rob, and state your question?
Yes, I'm Rob Fiesler, clergy in Santa Barbara. I actually included a multi-part question there. Thank you for your good work, by the way, Molly and Christy and others of the team. But I asked this last year, I think, and I knew that I believe the answer was that the conference did get an employee retention credit. And so if I'm wondering what the amount of that was and where it was applied. Is it in our conference budget somewhere, or is it on the balance sheet as reserves?
All right, that's question I'm going to turn over to Christy.
Great question. Rob, I know that there are not reserves allocated from a prior ERC or PPP loan disbursement that we received. It's usually the common practice that it goes to offset whatever those salary expenses were that we received compensation for. So I can answer that where they're not restricted funds. My guess is that they were applied to whatever the operating expenses were for that season, but I am happy to follow up with an email after early next week with more specific details if you would like.
Thank you. I'll shoot you an email and you can get back to me when that's convenient.
My pleasure.
All right, the next question is from Lisa Scott. Lisa, can you introduce yourself?
Lisa, peace be with you. I'm supposed to reply to that. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you, yeah.
Lisa Scott, lay member, Glendora United Methodist Church. In reference to your answer to Selena Kidd, you said you have the available but not easily presentable. Can you tell us whether or not it is approximately 9/12? Because that's where we are in the calendar year.
I'm happy to answer your question to the best of my ability. So, as we know, there's seasonality in an annual conference budget. So I think your question, I can see it in the chat, might have alluded to personnel costs. I could be wrong and maybe I made that up, but some costs are 9/12 year to date. Some of them fluctuate. You know, it's always a rule that annual conference have fluctuations in the expenses. So I would say for the most part, we are trending year to date what our budget is year to date, certainly in the personnel category. Being new to the annual conference, candidly, there are some things that I don't know if they're going to swing up in Q4, but we are closely monitoring the amount of apportionments that are coming in related to the expenses that are going out.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you so much. Looks like there's no other questions or statements for or against, so let's move to the vote. If you would take out your devices and please vote now. All right, looks like you have approved our budget recommendation 2410. Thank you, everyone, for your good work. We're moving on to recommendation 2413 around quotas and special askings. I'm going to move this to Reverend Molly Vetter again.
Thank you, Bishop. As you just said, we're looking at recommendation 2413, which is only available through the link. It's not in the preliminary report. These quotas are a set of second mile giving opportunities that support ministries we value and want to support, but whose funding wasn't included in the apportioned budget or this piece of their funding. So we designate them as quotas, which makes them available to the whole conference as a second mile giving option and asks us to divide it up to assign the percentage of the that quota asking that would go to each church so that it comes on your apportionment statement as so that you can see what piece of that you could be invited to contribute as a local church. I would flag you're always able to contribute more. It's not a limit. But these quotas are set to be the same amounts as they were last year. And I move adoption of recommendation 2413, our quotas and special askings.
Thank you, Molly. Recommendation 2413 is before you. Are there any questions or statements for or against? All right, there are no questions that are being raised, so you appear to be ready to vote, so take out your devices and vote now. All right, looks like you have adopted recommendation 2413. Thank you, everyone. I want you to know that it is our hope and our goal that next year we won't need a special called conference. We will do all of this in the regular annual conference session. But we've gone through some transitions, and this has been an important time for us at right now. I want to thank especially Reverend Bob Rhodes, Reverend Kathy Kapp, Reverend Jonathan Shute. I always say his name like a Mexican, Jonathan Shute, Reverend Molly Vetter, Rod Sprott, Jen Hansen, Margaret, who attends to everything I need in the back room, and Aaron Hawkins Smith and Christy Drenner. There are others who have helped us make this session happen. You know who you are, and I apologize if I've left your name out, but know that I see your work and I appreciate the work that goes on behind the scenes. So we have attended to this special called conference. We have gathered for holy conferencing. We gathered and were able to discuss things in a way that is honorable before God and before each other, showing that we do care for each other. And we have made our decisions as one body so that as we go forward, we own our own decisions because we made them together. So thank you so much for the time that you took. And I know tomorrow is a special day in the week for all of us. So as you go into your next big event of gathering the people together and worshiping together on a Sunday morning and lifting up the things that God has put on your heart for you pastors and for lay leaders, for being present for the people in your neighborhood, in your community. Know that my prayers are with you, and that I walk this journey with you in all the ways that I can. Let's end this session with a prayer. God, thank you so much for the ways that you have helped us this day and in the journeys that we've been on. We pray today for those places in the world where people are crying. And we ask that as their tears fall, that you would be especially tender to them, and that you would use us as avenues of your grace and your mercy. Forgive us for the things we forget to do, and remind us of what we need to do. We ask this in Jesus. Amen. Have a good Saturday afternoon and Sunday.